Sorry, I'm not.
Yep.
I'm not on the air right now, am I? Okay.
No.
Okay. What is it? The Pittsburgh Toronto at 7?
Edmonton, Montreal.
Oh, all right. Okay, so I'll count you down here. Okay.
Yep.
3, 2, 1. All right. Good evening. Good afternoon, good night, wherever you may be, joining us from around the world. It's another edition of Hockey Primetime as we're in the thick of the holiday season. What does that mean? It means we've been gifted with a full slate of games on the NHL schedule tonight. A lot of really nice-looking, tantalizing fixtures that we're going to be looking at today and for the next 2 hours or so before we turn it over to coverage from the Bell Center of Connor McDavid and the Oilers' annual visit to Montreal to take on the hapless Canadiens. Let's see which of these massively disappointing franchises will win. Somebody's going to win, right? Yes, the Wolves, the Sharks, what's the analogy I want to make here? The Jackals are circling in Montreal. A lot of unhappy fans, a lot of unhappy media members in Montreal. My name is Conor McKenna, and yes, this is Hockey Primetime. We're with you every Saturday from 5 to 7 on Sirius XM NHL Network Radio. The show is also streaming live at hockeyprimetime.com. You can watch the feed on Facebook Live, on Periscope, and on YouTube Live as well. We're internet famous, so very, very happy that you've made us a part of your Saturday. And whatever team you're pulling for tonight, and maybe you're on the way to the rink right now. I wish you the best of luck, and I hope you have a great time. We've got a game in the books already earlier today. Man, oh man, you think things are going badly for your team. You look at that Detroit Red Wings squad right now, and really just wondering, as one of their arch rivals, one of their historic rivals, as historic as a non-original six team can be anyway, the St. Louis Blues just curb stomped the Red Wings 6-1 earlier today in front of probably a half-filled Joe Louis Arena. And by the time there was 10 minutes of Joe Louis Arena, of course, what am I saying? Little Caesars Arena was probably, I don't know, maybe 20% full by the time there was about 10 minutes left in that game. And yeah, St. Louis gave it to the Red Wings. St. Louis is good. They've got a guy in Jaden Schwartz who's got 14 goals on the season. How about Braden Schen's on 15 goals this season? 6-1 was your final, as Shen put the icing on the cake with that late empty. No, I don't even think it was an empty net, or was it just another late goal? So a 6-1 win, and the Red Wings, well, who scored? They got a goal from Frans Nielsen, and Nielsen is one of many aging core players. What do you do when you're clearly not only are you not contending for a championship? I think at this point we'd admit that it's highly unlikely that the Red Wings make the Stanley Cup playoffs this year, despite being in the weakest division in hockey. But you've got this aging core. Henrik Zetterberg, what does he have? 4 years left on his contract. Nielsen's got term. The guys that are difference makers that are contributing are older players for the most part. They've got some nice young guys. But do you hit the reset button? At what point are you just treading water? Anyway, just it feels like an interesting time right now for the Detroit Red Wings, who lost yet again today. Meanwhile, the Blues are looking good, looking like a model franchise in this league, drafting well, making what appear to be some pretty good trades, including that. Right now, how is that trade looking for Philadelphia? Sending Braden Schenn over in that deal. And getting Yori Laterra for Braden Schenn. Wow, what a lopsided trade. And one other thing that occurred to me, thinking of Detroit, who's Detroit and St. Louis, right? I mean, longtime Central Division rivals, and now Detroit's in the East, and they're in the Atlantic. But imagine if Detroit, as bad as they are, at least they're in the Atlantic Division. Imagine they were still in the Central, facing St. Louis regularly, facing Nashville regularly, getting a dose of the Blackhawks, who are having some troubles of their own right now. I think things would probably be a whole lot worse than they are right now. Anyway, I wanted to start with the Canadiens today. Went a little bit off track there talking about the Red Wings, but a busy show. And as we mentioned, we'll take you to the Bell Center for coverage of the Oilers at the Canadiens as soon as we're done here at 7 o'clock Eastern time. Should be from the TSN 690 Habs Radio Network with Dan Robertson and Sergio Momesso bringing you the broadcast there. And it feels like a little bit of a reckoning right now for Marc Bergevin and his Montreal Canadiens. a team that have 30 points through 30 games this year, and somehow that's good enough to contend for a playoff spot in the aforementioned weak Atlantic Division. But they lost to the Flames the other night, and it felt like a bad one in Montreal. And if you're joining us for the first time, or I'll give you a little bit of background here, I host a radio show. I hosted the Montreal Canadiens radio network broadcast for a long time in Montreal for TSN Radio, and I now host the morning show on TSN Radio in Montreal, Monday to Friday, 6 to 10 a.m. So spend a lot of time talking about, covering, and tweeting about the Montreal Canadiens. And that loss to the Flames on Thursday night, there are losses and there are losses, and not all losses are created equal. Every hockey fan knows that. It's one thing to drop and you say, okay, they lost in overtime to the Calgary Flames. There's no real shame in that. Calgary is not a good team, but they're not a bad team either. And if they were in the Atlantic Division, they'd probably be up there near the top of the division. Unfortunately, they're in a division that's a little bit tougher. But Calgary, under the circumstances, winning the game in overtime, it sort of went like this. Claude Julien, coach of the Canadiens, in overtime, decides that Tomas Plekanec, who is an aging and largely offensively unproductive player, will start the overtime period. And this has been an ongoing struggle. This is the type of thing that Michel Therrien was doing, as well as the Canadiens would go into 3-on-3. You're looking at it, and the Flames are coming out with Michael Frolik and Michael Backlund. Is it Backlund? I always screw that up. Yes, it is Backlund. Backlund and Granlund are two players I have trouble with. But yes, Backlund. He comes out with those guys. The Flames come out with those guys. And Tomas Plekanec comes out on the ice, and just sort of thinking, right, Tomas Plekanec has 3 goals in 30 games. Alex Galchenyuk, the Canadiens' young, offensively gifted and former top 5 draft pick, is been glued to the bench since about 13 minutes remaining in the third period of the game. But we know Galchenyuk can win you games 3-on-3. We've seen this happen before. He skates. He's got the skill. That kind of space is what the guy was made for. And you're waiting for Johnny Gaudreau and Sean Monahan to get out there on the ice. And those are the guys for the Flames. Those are the difference makers. I mean, you can only make a point up to a point. So the Canadiens lose in overtime. If you haven't heard by now, Sean Monahan ends up scoring the goal off a big rebound from a Johnny Gaudreau shot. And what a season Gaudreau is having there. And the game is over, and you've got a point. The thing is about this game is, now remember, right? And then some people want to say, wow, it's the Calgary Flames. I mean, it's a nice team. It's a good-looking team. And you know what? They do have a pretty nice-looking team. They really do. I like their top 4 on defense. I love Monahan and Gaudreau. There are certainly some question marks in that lineup and arguably in goal. But they got a decent roster. But they also, that's one you want to tip your hat to them. I think they were 14-12-2 coming into the game. So not exactly a world beater record, a team that loses about as often as they win. And they played the night before in Toronto. So they were in Toronto the night before. They traveled to Montreal. They came in and they beat the Canadiens. The Canadiens look the more tired team. They look the team that had played the day before, which they had not. They hadn't played since Tuesday. The Flames also started a goaltender who was getting his 2nd career start in the NHL, was playing his 4th career NHL game. And he looked shaky. He didn't look good. And remember that Montreal, while they were in a playoff spot going into that game, Boston, I believe, held the same amount of points or was right behind them with 4 games in hand. Boston and Tuukka Rask in particular playing some good hockey lately. So the Canadiens lose this game, and they go to war with Tomas Plekanec. Again, great. And he's a good player, long-time servant of the team, a guy who's worn the CH with distinction. But the Flames win that game, and then the numbers are in. It's 30 points through 30 games for the Canadiens, meaning that Montreal's on pace for 82 points this year, which somehow, in some world in this way, keeps you in contention in the Atlantic Division. And we know 82 points is not getting you into the playoffs at the end of the season. But it's also not bad enough to put you in the lottery conversation, in so much as the teams with the really bad records, unless you're talking about Colorado last year, somehow falling out of that top 3. But Montreal is also looking at a fairly middling to mediocre draft pick at that point too. And I'm a big picture guy. Like, if you're not going to make the playoffs, I say you might as well just be terrible. Get as good of a draft pick as possible. Otherwise, what's the point, right? But right now, the Canadiens are in this sort of a treading water situation. They're not a very good team. They're not a terrible team. They've got Carey Price. They've got Shea Weber, both players now over the age of 30. And Max Pacioretty getting into that conversation as well. They've got sort of core pieces, good players, right? The kind of guys that a lot of teams would like to build around. The problem is the guys that they've built around them just don't appear ready to do the job. So what's the scenario here? Are they going to figure it out? Hard to imagine that they will, right? Yes, I realize they put up 10 goals against Detroit the other day, and they scored 16 goals in 2 games against Detroit. And they proceeded to go out and continue to lose to teams that are not in their division. I think they're 9-1-1 against the Atlantic Division, meaning that they've got 5 wins in 19 games against everybody else. Not a good team. If you're going to be bad, just be terrible. How bad are the Canadiens this year? Or how mediocre are the Canadiens this year? Fans in the Montreal market spent a month and a half pining for David Schlemko. Well, David Schlemko was signed in the offseason. He's coming over, and this is a guy who's going to help out the defense. Now, God bless David Schlemko, who's an NHL defenseman and a perfectly serviceable guy, but you're not a very good team if you're counting the days until David Schlemko is going to make his debut and hopefully come in and help you turn your season around. Your season's probably not going to be going very well if that's the case. The analogy I enjoyed most this week that I heard was from a friend of mine, Arpin Basu, who writes for The Athletic in Montreal, the editor-in-chief, and he joined me to talk a little bit about the Canadiens, and he described the Canadiens' blue line as follows. He said, Shea Weber is like a daycare worker on that blue line. The picture, and you've seen this, right, whether you're a parent or just a random human who lives in a city or wherever else, you've seen those daycare workers walking down the street, and they've got 12 kids walking behind them, and they're all holding on to this tether or whatever you want to call it, right? Just a whole bunch of kids, and they're all holding on to the thing so nobody gets lost, right? That's Shea Weber. Shea Weber's that daycare worker holding on at the front of the line. The Canadiens, the rest of their defensemen, that's the little kids. That's the Shea Weber analogy, and I think that analogy is fairly apt, albeit maybe a little bit harsh for what the Montreal blue line looks like this year. What else is happening? I'm in Toronto, as a matter of fact. Excited for that, and excited to be able to bring you the show from Toronto, where I know everybody's excited about TFC involved in the MLS Cup final. Why wouldn't you be excited about the Leafs playing some excellent hockey right now? How about Freddie Anderson looking like a world beater, looking like a guy who might be in the Vezina Trophy conversation at this point? A very, very exciting time for Leafs fans. And how about this? How about when Mitch Marner starts putting the puck in the net? What's the guy got? 2 goals this season? And here we are getting closer and closer to the halfway mark. I believe it's a matter of time until Mitch Marner gets going. So it's fun, and it's the Pittsburgh Penguins. It's Sidney Crosby in town tonight, and I guess they get the Oilers tomorrow. So some nice looking hockey coming up. And I don't think the Leafs are even firing on all cylinders. Just wait until maybe they can add a piece or two to that blue line. They're getting some good hockey out of a lot of guys, but is Austin Matthews? Has he been a Hart Trophy contender? I don't think so. He's been good. He had that great start to the season. But all of those things, that seems to me, are gonna come. And maybe best of all, you've got a Leafs team that is extremely fun to watch. Just wait till they add John Tavares in the offseason, right? Oh, maybe not just yet. Let's talk a little bit more about that. We've got John Tavares. Oh, no, excuse me, not John Tavares. We've got Arthur Staple joining us to talk about John Tavares. Arthur covering the New York Islanders for Newsday. He's the man to get Islanders news from, and he can give us his insight as far as what's going on with John Tavares, whether he's any closer to inking an extension to keep him. Where do we say to keep him with the Islanders? We don't know where. We just know what the name of the team is, right? Where are they going to be playing? It appears to be sort of up in the air right now. Do they need a little more certainty if they're going to keep John Tavares around? We'll find out what Arthur has to say about that next. Sensitive Islanders fans, never fear. We're not going to stoke the fires of John Tavares leaving. I know Islanders fans do not like it when that topic comes up. If John Tavares wanted to make that go away, he'd probably just sign a contract right now. The salary cap going up. You know John Tavares is going to get paid. So more on that with Arthur Staple in just a few moments. This is Hockey Primetime. We're with you until 7 o'clock tonight before we turn it over to coverage of the Leafs. No, of the Canadiens and the Edmonton Oilers. Sorry, I got to get my game face on. I'm Conor McKenna. We'll be back right after this. welcome back. This is Hockey Primetime. My name is Conor McKenna, your host. Nice to be with you on this Saturday evening. Maybe you're listening to our podcast page at hockeyprimetime.com. All old episodes are archived there, whether they're good or not. You can find them there for posterity, and so we can go back and sometimes find some of those freezing cold takes, like when I talked about how Connor McDavid was already the best hockey player in the world based on what he did in the first game of the season. Remember that one? Maybe I was a little bit premature. I don't know. I think I might have said he's the greatest hockey player of all time. That is a freezing cold take right there. The New York Islanders right now are having a pretty solid season, aren't they? What do they need to get to the next level to be a sort of championship contending team? Well, the answer might be between the pipes. They also need to hang on to John Tavares. With more on the Islanders story, a pleasure to welcome back to the show from Newsday covering the New York Islanders, Arthur Staple. Arthur, how are you?
I'm good, Connor. How are you?
I'm doing very well. And I know that this is a sensitive topic for Islanders fans. They do not like it when this thing comes up, at least not when you start talking about how John Tavares might be wearing the uniform of another team next year. I guess it's important to remember, though, right? We saw Steven Stamkos flirt with the devil here, and he stayed in Tampa time and time again. Guys like this hit the market. They stay with their teams. That's got to be at least a little bit reassuring for Islanders fans, doesn't it?
I don't know if you know a lot of Islander fans, Connor, personally. So reassuring is not the way that I would describe their feelings about this entire situation to date. I think the best bet for the Islanders is if John Tavares doesn't get to even that week of meetings that Stamkos got to before he decided to sign. He was in a situation where Tampa was obviously coming off a great year, and he'd had a lot of success there in terms of the playoffs and getting close to a Stanley Cup. And that's not John Tavares' history here, but I think the things that he's looking for, obviously the arena being one of the top line ones where they're going to play in the future if he's going to sign long term, what the team's going to look like. And I think he's gotten some good glimpses so far this season with some of their younger players who are obviously performing pretty well. And so I think that sort of, if those are the checks that he's looking at, the boxes he's looking to check, I think he doesn't have them checked yet, but I imagine he's got the pen out to check those boxes. So I think things are pointing in the right direction for him signing. I don't think it's going to be anything anytime soon, even if there's an arena announcement in the coming weeks or months. But I think it's going in the right direction. Is
there anything imminent in based on what you know about the arena situation?
I know very little about that arena situation. Thankfully, at my publication, we have smarter people who cover government and all the region and things like that. But they're having a kind of a public unveiling for the area near Belmont Park for the community to see some of the plans. That's going to be tomorrow, I believe, with the Islanders owners and some other planning people. They're only up against one other bid, which is a MLS soccer team that's partially owned by the Yankees. So, I think things look good on that front. I don't know if there's a timetable for the state to make a decision, but it certainly seems like the Islanders have the most complete proposal. They have good partners. They have a very eager ownership that wants to get in there and put some shovels in the ground and create a new arena that the Islanders can finally call home. So, nothing is certainly set, and I haven't heard any whispers of anything, but it's certainly much like the Tavares situation seems to be looking up, I would say.
And as far as the negotiations go, can you tell me, now that we've learned that the salary cap will reportedly go up between $3 and $7 million next year, meaning that a cap between $78 and $82 million, is Tavares looking to eat up a chunk of the salary cap similar to the one that McDavid is eating right now?
I think that's the right ballpark that you're in. I don't know. I think even if the cap had stayed flat, I think that would still be what he was looking for. John is very aware of his place in the game. He knows that if he gets to the open market, what the numbers would look like. And he gave the Islanders a very team-friendly deal on his second contract the last time around, the 6-year deal that's ending now. So I think he understands, and especially being a big Players Association guy as he is, that he's not taking any discounts. I don't see him signing for a year or two somewhere to try to win it all. He's getting the max, and he's going to get what he's earned, and that's his right as a guy who's going to free agency. And if it's 8 years for the Islanders, I wouldn't imagine it'll be below $12 million a year. And if it's July 1, then you just point the arrow up as the salary cap goes up. So, I don't think there's much in the way of negotiation going on because John Tavares and his camp at CAA have decided to wait and see. And when he gives the green light, I think it's going to be a very short negotiation, and it's going to be very sweet for John Tavares.
And as far as the Islanders, I mean, they're not going to try to play hardball or something and hold firm on a number. It's sort of, is it a blank check kind of situation?
It is. It's a Publishers Clearinghouse. The big check, I think, is what they're going to be pulling out. So it's they've made it clear that he's their guy, and they want him to be the captain for a long time, be the face of this franchise for a long time, and I think that translates into blank check time for him.
We hear, and I thought of this recently when it came to Matthew Barzal and the fact that he's really sort of emerged as that second line center and a guy who looks like he's going to be a superstar. I mean, 20 years old, he's unbelievable with what he's doing and sort of starring at points night in, night out, and with a guy like Tavares in front of him. Edmonton wants Leon Draisaitl to be that guy, right? The mythical two-headed monster, Crosby and Malkin being the prototypical example of that. Does the fact that Barzal has really emerged this year, is that something that helps out? We talk a lot about, he wants to play with this guy, he wants to play with that guy. How good is it that there's the potential for that 1-2 punch? How enticing might that be?
I think that's hugely enticing for John. He's talked to me often throughout the year about being a mentor of sorts to Barzal. There certainly hasn't been this kind of excitement about a rookie since he came along 9 years ago. And John, like I said, takes a lot of his role seriously, and captain and leader of the team is certainly high among them. And I think Matthew Barzal is a bit different kind of personality, but the way that those two guys mesh, I think, is their incredible intensity on the ice. And I think that's a place where Tavares can help Matthew Barzal out. How to channel it, not to let it boil over into frustration, whether it's penalties or inattentiveness to detail. And really, when people make that Crosby-Malkin comparison, it's funny because we just were in Pittsburgh, and Matthew Barzal has always idolized Sidney Crosby. And if there's a comparable guy in the game right now to the way that Barzal can control the puck and use his balance to kind of keep people away from him, it's certainly Sid. And I think Barzal is really eager to have those comparisons be made with the way that he's playing. And really, Tavares and Crosby is not much of a comparison, just different styles of players. So maybe this will be Barzal as the Crosby to Tavares' Malkin. And it's no disrespect to John Tavares, he's obviously the number one center, but to have a guy who's such a skilled playmaker and puck possessor and chance generator the way that Barzal has been, it takes a lot of pressure off John Tavares, and that I imagine would be very appealing to play with for many years to come.
Is there a desire, as far as you're concerned, on Tavares' part? Now, you've been covering this guy his whole career, so I'd be curious for your perspective on this. But I think about Sidney Crosby. He's in Tim Hortons ads. He's all over the place here in Canada, despite the fact that he doesn't play here. And I know John Tavares is not Sidney Crosby, and he doesn't have the championship pedigree necessarily, and probably wasn't as hyped up of a guy, whatever. But we know that John Tavares he's a superstar player in the National Hockey League. But he has this sort of reputation to be sort of a quiet, understated, under the radar kind of guy. How accurate is that as far as how he actually is? And do you know if there's any desire on his part to become more of a face of the NHL kind of guy?
I think there's a definite push-pull there. Obviously, he and Crosby share an agency, and CAA can make those kind of deals happen, whether you're playing in Brooklyn/Long Island or Pittsburgh or Edmonton or Toronto. So, I'm sure that there's things that he would like to do, and maybe with some more success for the Islanders, that stuff will come. But also, I know that John likes the Long Island life. He's a guy who, since they've moved to Brooklyn, as a guy who rides the commuter rail from where most of the players live, out near the old Coliseum, into Brooklyn. Fairly undisturbed for a guy who's a superstar, and I think that's the way he likes it. And that doesn't mean that if he gets to July 1 and Toronto can configure it so that they could make a big offer to him that he wouldn't consider it, being back in his hometown and much more in the spotlight. But I think all things being equal, he likes the relative calm and anonymity of being on Long Island and not being mobbed all the time, and just having only a few media people around him asking him questions about this stuff on a daily basis. So he's definitely not a big city, live in the limelight and do magazine shoots kind of guy. So that may change as he gets older, but for now I think that, he seems to like that quiet life, and maybe that is a factor with all the things that he's considering getting in terms of where he wants to be in the future.
Looking at the Metropolitan Division right now, what do we have? 2 points between first and fifth place in the division, and the Islanders picking it up right there in fourth right now. They're tied with Pittsburgh. They hold a couple of games in hand, and 1 point behind Jersey. Same number of victories, one more regulation loss. I wonder about the goaltending with Halak and Greiss. Is that tandem good enough for this team? Clearly they appear to be good enough to make the playoffs. If the season ended today, they would be in there. But how much of an Achilles heel is goaltending when it comes down to those games against the best teams in the conference?
It's been rearing up a bit more of late. I think the offense has obviously been prodigious. Leading the league in goals per game. I got a bunch of guys who can put the puck in the net and have, and you can see, even the other night in Pittsburgh when it was a pretty quiet game for a while, and Pittsburgh had the 2 quick strikes. And in a lot of years that I've covered games in that building in Pittsburgh, that usually means lights out, and it wasn't for this Islander team, and it was Barzal who was in there getting it started. So, I think they feel like no matter who they're playing, they can put up 3 or 4 or 5 goals, and that gives you a lot of leeway when it comes to defense and goaltending. And, I think that's going to wear off as the season goes on. You get into the kind of the dog days, January, February. I don't think the offense is going to be clicking quite so much. So you need your goaltenders to make a lot of saves, which they definitely have not yet. It's hard to pin it entirely on these two guys, but they really just haven't been consistent enough. And this is after a couple of years of some discontent with having 3 goalies around. This was supposed to be the ideal scenario for Halak and Greiss. Greiss got the 3-year extension midway through last year. Halak, last year of his deal, you think he'd want to be lights out to be able to show that he could still continue on in the NHL, and it hasn't quite worked out that way yet. I don't think Garth Snow is ready to pull the trigger and find anybody else. They've got a decent prospect in Christopher Gibson down in the AHL who they can consider as kind of an easy fix, and there's probably going to be some guys available as we get closer to that end of February trade deadline. So, the Islanders have a lot of extra draft picks that they can throw around if need be, and I'm sure it's on Garth Snow's radar, whether it's a Jimmy Howard or a Marc-Andre Fleury or someone out there who's got a little bit of time left on their deal and is maybe on the older end, but someone who could maybe salvage it. But for now, Halak is getting his second straight start. He's generally been the better of the two, and I think they'd like somebody here to take the ball and run with it for a few games just to show that they can get the big saves when they need them. It's
Halak tonight, 903 save percentage going up against, it's expected to be Tuukka Rask for the Bruins at 7 o'clock, the Islanders at Boston. Arthur, thank you for your time. Love chatting with you, man.
All right, Connor. Anytime, my friend.
That is Arthur Staple of Newsday covering the New York Islanders. This is Hockey Primetime here on Sirius XM NHL Network Radio. My name is Conor McKenna. Nice to be hanging out with you on this Saturday evening. Coming up next, Sean Leahy is going to be joining us. Sean covers the National Hockey League for Pro Hockey Talk on NBC Sports. The NHL is, I don't know if I can remember a team jumping to the front of the expansion line the way that Seattle did this week. Let's talk a little bit about that story with Leahy. That's what's coming up next. This is Hockey Primetime on Sirius XM, NHL Network Radio, and streaming live always at hockeyprimetime.com.
Sean's ready.
3, 2, 1. Hey, welcome back. It's Hockey Primetime. I'm Conor McKenna with you until 7 o'clock tonight. We'll turn it over to coverage of the Edmonton Oilers visiting Montreal to take on the Canadiens. Happy Saturday to you. And one game in the books already earlier today, the Blues beating up on the Red Wings 6-1. So let me ask you a question. When you think of Seattle, what do you think of? I'll give you my list of things I think of. I think of inflated real estate prices, expensive place to live. I think of smoked salmon, I guess, maybe. Sure. Starbucks, Microsoft, Amazon, Frasier, of course. I mean, I think of Frasier. I don't think of hockey, though. Do I? But maybe I should start, as it looks like, and rather unexpectedly this week, Seattle just jumped right to the front of the expansion queue. Who would have thought that it was so easy to just all of a sudden, oh, yes, let's get an expansion team. Here's how much it's going to cost. Here's where they're going to play. Easy as pie, right? All right, well, let's talk a little bit more about that and go around the NHL with our next guest. His name is Sean Leahy. No, he's not from Seattle, but we are going to talk about the possibility of the NHL going to Seattle. Leahy's with Pro Hockey Talk on NBC Sports. Hello, Sean.
Hey, Connor, listen, if you're thinking of Seattle, the main thing that should stick out is the Sean Kemp dunking on jabronis throughout the 90s for sure.
Yes, and fathering tons of children along the way, if memory serves, right? That's a good point.
Yeah, exactly. Well, he is the Rain Man, right?
Is it? And he was awesome there for a while with Gary Payton. Is it at all I understand the NHL, they want their $650 million and great. And we're also talking about the potential return of an NBA team to Seattle. I mean, do you think, what I understand here that you and I are not experts on the market of Seattle, but can they support all of that in addition to an NFL team, a Major League Baseball team? They've got a team right now competing for the MLS Cup, literally as we speak. Is that too much for Seattle, which is not a massive city?
Well, we're going to find out, right? Gary Bettman said this week that they're letting the ownership group there start a ticket drive just to kind of drum up some interest. And obviously, we've known Seattle's won basketball there since the Sonics left. Hockey has kind of been on the radar really within the last couple of years. But, I mean, there's junior hockey there. There's some NHL history there way, way, way back in the day. It is a good sports market. It would make a nice rivalry there with the Canucks. But as far as the interest, I mean, we're going to find out. Certainly, the ownership group feels that it'll work there in a new building, splitting with a potential NBA team. And of course, if you're one of the 31 NHL owners, you're thinking, how I'm going to get another expansion check in the mail. Hopefully within the next couple of years if this goes through. So obviously the NHL will be on board with that and the owners. So we'll see just how much interest is there when they do this ticket drop. We saw how quickly a lot of the tickets were snapped up in Vegas last year, so it'll be curious to see just kind of the speed of how things are selling there once that gets going.
Well, there certainly is a lot of money in Seattle, that's for sure, and I'm sure that's something that the NHL is interested in. I guess the other thing that's been interesting is that we started hearing recently about Houston as another possibility and maybe one for relocation as well. But what of the poor people of Quebec City? I mean, can you imagine what a bad week you had in Quebec City? You were sort of, there was this feeling that maybe Carolina, they're for sale and they're not exactly killing it attendance-wise. Maybe we're going to get the Carolina Hurricanes in this NHL-ready building that they've had now for years. No, not so fast. The Carolina Hurricanes aren't going anywhere. And then all of a sudden, Seattle bursts out of nowhere, Kool-Aid Man style, and jumps to the front of the expansion line as well, when Quebec's been hoping for an NHL team for years and years and years. Any sympathy for the fine folks in La Belleville?
Yeah, remember they were in the hunt as Vegas was getting a team, and when they had the press conference announcing Vegas, it was like, sorry, Quebec, too bad. But I guess there's that hesitation with the Canadian dollar and it fluctuating and affecting things there. And Seattle, they had the money, they had a building. It's a U.S. dollar, so I guess the NHL felt confident in that going forward. You'd love to see a team back in Quebec, the Nordiques, because that's kind of what they want. They want the Nordiques to have that rivalry with the Canadians and another Canadian market with a strong history there. But it's almost like Quebec, Houston. You always hear kind of Hamilton every once in a while pop up in some of these other cities, like Kansas City as well. It seems like they're just, for now at least, unless there's a need for relocation, like you mentioned, they're just going to be pawns. They're going to be those cities that are used by current NHL teams like Calgary, perhaps, to get new buildings out of their constituents and their citizens. So, yeah, I'm curious to see what happens going forward. Certainly, the Quebec people have been and will continue to keep their eye on the Coyotes now that the Hurricanes are pretty much set for the next 7 years at least. And I'm curious to see just kind of what kind of pressure they might put on the NHL if things kind of go south with the Coyotes and their arena pursuit.
But doesn't it, I mean, just from a logical standpoint, and I mean, how logical is the National Hockey League? Maybe not very, but it would make all the sense in the world, wouldn't it? If they add a team in Seattle, then you've got the 16 in each conference thing going. And then if Arizona is going to move anywhere, well, you start a whole new headache there by adding them to the Eastern Conference, yada, yada, yada. Meanwhile, Houston, the fourth biggest market in the United States after New York, Los Angeles, and Chicago, boom, it's Houston. It's a big city, a championship city recently with the Astros. That makes a lot more sense, doesn't it? For relocation, just pop them over one state over and add them to Houston rather than, imagine the trouble of moving all that hockey equipment all the way up to Quebec City. But, in all seriousness, doesn't that make a lot more sense than Quebec?
It does, but the key thing is, that Fertitta, the owner there, he acknowledged interest. That's one thing. It's one thing to announce interest, to have the building, but it's one thing to announce interest and one thing to actually go through with it, the whole vetting process, getting your money together to either buy an expansion fee or get the relocation money, which I believe Bettman said would also be $650 million just for a relocation fee. I'm pretty sure he said that. So it costs a lot of money to get a team no matter what. So you may want hockey in Houston. It's just a matter of whether the ownership is able to pony up that dollar amount. And, you need ownership, you need a building. Houston has the building. Houston has interested ownership, but they still need to kind of pony up and really go through with it and sit down and meet with Bill Daly and Gary Bettman and kind of lay out their plans and show them if they are truly interested in being a relocation option, a future expansion option, that they have the funds to do it, because it's certainly a pretty costly venture. And
I don't know how to think like a billionaire, which is maybe why I'm not a billionaire. But I'd be like, you got to give me $650 million if you want me to take the Arizona Coyotes off your hands. This is a disaster. Why? It's crazy to me that it still goes on. I feel like we accept the insanity of the Arizona Coyotes' continued existence, with all due respect and love to the people who actually do support the team in that market, both of you guys. But it's crazy, isn't it?
10 years.
It's crazy that the Arizona Coyotes still exist. Yes, it's madness.
Yeah, I mean, with going back to Jerry Moyes, and I mean, when I first started writing at Puck Daddy in 2008, I was writing about the Jerry Moyes situation and Wayne Gretzky, the NHL still owing him money and all that. And here we are, a decade later, they're still trying to work out an arena deal. And yeah, I mean, there's so many good, passionate Coyotes fans there that have just been having to deal with this. I mean, imagine trying to sell season tickets and get fans interested in your team for the long term. And kind of make this part of the fabric of your sporting life, and you're not sure if the team's going to be there. I mean, imagine how many people have hesitated jumping on board because of that reason, which is, I'm sure, has certainly hurt the growth. But if you're Gary Bettman, he's been fighting this, like I said, for over a decade. And every time he talks about the Coyotes being Arizona, he's always going to bring up Austin Matthews, right? Austin Matthews grew up loving the Coyotes, and look at him now, creating hockey stars in non-traditional markets. So I'm not sure what the drop dead date or the drop dead point has to be here for the NHL to finally let go and be like, okay, we need to do something here. But I guess they're going to exhaust every single option they can to try and get a better arena situation for the Coyotes and keeping there for the long term. Finally,
that's it's another thing that just also makes no sense to me is that if I'm Jeff Molson, I own the Montreal Canadiens, highly successful, although not making as much money right now as they were a couple of years ago, and you're Gary Bettman, and you're telling me, okay, guys, everybody, you got to chip in. We all got to help out the Coyotes again here, year after year after year, when it seems that there's viable markets that will, and again, I'm not trying to crap all over Phoenix or Glendale or Scottsdale or whatever, but that's another thing that just seems crazy to me. Like, why continue to prop up, and why would the owners be okay with that? I wouldn't be down with that. If I could apply the logic to something else in my life and there was somebody who constantly needed to be propped up, I'd be like, well, at some point you gotta cut the cord. It goes against everything capitalism is supposed to be about.
Yeah, you'd think that the owners or the league is selling these owners that, once this situation is resolved and we keep them there, there's some kind of long-term benefit to the owners going forward. I mean, what they're paying, obviously, they're certainly paying I'm sure they're paying a decent amount, but it's probably, a drop in the bucket for some of these guys,
right?
In regards to what they're making overall every single year of their revenues. So keeping that long-term footprint there, I'm sure, is important to the league to just kind of. It's been Bettman's thing since he came in, bringing these franchises to non-traditional markets and growing the U.S. footprint TV-wise in Florida and Dallas and California and Texas and Arizona, and kind of expanding it there. So, like I said, I don't know what the last straw is here, but certainly you hear Bettman talk every time he's asked. He's asked about it every single year, a couple times a year, specifically by Quebec-based reporters. It sounds like it's coming to a head, and there's something pretty soon. A decision needs to be made, so they at least go forward one way or the other.
All right, man. Well, hey, listen, always fun to talk hockey with you. I appreciate it. Hey, a quick one for you here. How excited are you for Olympic hockey this year or next year or whatever, the Olympic hockey that's coming up? On a scale of 1 to 10, how excited are you?
Kind of a 9.
Really?
I know it's not NHL players. So it's not going to be best on best, but there are a lot of good stories to come out of this. I mean, these are guys who spent some time in the NHL, but mostly in Europe now. Some guys have been journeymen. Some guys like Chris Leahy for Canada is 37 years old, never played in the NHL, been in Europe his entire career. I think there's going to be a lot of good stories coming out of it. I just remember back in 94, 92, Ray LeBlanc, the goalie for Team USA, was a great story. Obviously, Peter Forsberg in 94 and Paul Kariya and those guys. So, there may be some young stars here if you get those junior players and those college players involved in Team Canada and the Team USA rosters. This is going to be the first introduction to a lot of people to guys like, for guys like Troy Terry and maybe Jordan Kyrou if they get on, as far as their exposure. And if they go on to bigger and better things in the NHL, this would kind of be the starting point for them. So I'm excited. I mean, yeah, it's going to be early mornings watching a bunch of career AHL and European guys play, but you look at it, and depending on what the KHL does with the whole Russia situation, it could be a pretty wide open tournament. So maybe we'll get some surprises. And plus, you have Korea playing for the first time with Jim Pack behind the bench, so they're going to be something to look for as well.
All right. Well, now you've got me a little bit more excited. I was at like a 2. Now I'm at like a 4. Sean, thanks for your time, bud. We appreciate it.
You got it, Connor.
That's Sean Leahy, NBC Sports Pro Hockey Talk. I'm Conor McKenna. It's Hockey Primetime. Let's talk a little bit about the Nashville Predators. Jim Diamond's going to be joining us, so we're not going to have a lot of time with Jim, but we're going to make it count. Coming up next here on Hockey Primetime. Hey, welcome back. It's Hockey Primetime on Sirius XM NHL Network Radio, streaming live at hockeyprimetime.com. My name is Conor McKenna. I am your host, and all of our shows are streamed live at hockeyprimetime.com. You can also find archived episodes at hockeyprimetime.com. So go check that out. Not right now, though. Right now, join us to talk to our friend Jim Diamond, covering the Nashville Predators for the Associated Press for Rinkside Report as well. Jim Diamond back on with us. How you doing, man?
I'm great. How about you, Connor?
I'm doing well. And I will say also this, author of an extremely impressive Instagram feed. A man knows how to take a photograph as well. So you can follow him there if you're into that as well. Hey, Jim, speaking of social media, what's up with the Las Vegas Golden Knights Twitter account taking a gratuitous and strange sort of shot at the reporters covering the Nashville Predators?
Yeah, I didn't see it at the time because I was scrambling trying to, rewrite my story when, Bonino scored the Predators take the lead last night. They said that the Predators, all Predators media was, or not all Predators, but Predators media was cheering after the goal. And so, it takes a lot to get me upset, but when I hear and see something like that, that's completely untrue, I felt the need to stick up for my brethren and sisterin here in the Nashville media, and we, kind of took them to task as best we could by saying that this was untrue and irresponsible, and we complained to Vegas's PR, and they have since issued an apology, so I appreciate that. But I know social media, team social media want to take some risks, and you're gonna swing and a miss a few times, but some people may not understand how dear we hold the no cheering in the press box and trying to maintain our impartiality in covering teams and games, and there was a lot of backlash to that. I'm not gonna lie.
It is weird. It's one of those things because I've been involved in cheering in the press box story of my own years ago when I was covering a Bruins Canadiens playoff series, and fans just don't really get it. It's not a big deal. It seems, at least to me, to most fans, where they're just like, what do you mean? Why is that even a thing? But to media members, especially in North America, it's definitely a thing. You don't cheer in the press box, and it's extremely unprofessional to do so. Anyway. All right, let's. We don't have a lot of time, unfortunately, Jim, but let's talk a little bit about these Predators. For starters, I mean, as good as they are, what are they going to look like when Ryan Ellis comes back? I mean, this is a scary looking team they've got there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Ryan Ellis finally got his due last year when the Predators made their run in the playoffs. I mean, he's been very good for several years, but I think people around the hockey world began to realize it. Their power play's clicking at close to 40% at home, and he's got a phenomenal shot and can make plays on the power play. So. You think their power play probably can improve more, but when you add a guy like Ryan Ellis there, that's it can't hurt for sure. And the bottom two of the Predators' defensive core has been kind of juggled around this season and struggled at times. So I think that's going to help them solidify them, because probably see like an Alexei Yemelin, friend of the Montreal,
2 minutes,
drop down probably to the third pairing and maybe stabilize that a little bit. So I think they're going to get a little bit better defensively. They've had some trouble holding on to third period leads, lately, and that's probably something that they definitely want to change. And when Ellis gets back, I can't see that not happening.
So it's been Emelin Subban.
It has. It's like a Montreal reunion. I don't know
Crazy.
if they played together in Montreal.
They did. It was terrible.
Well, he's been good. I was skeptical of the signing, or the trade, I guess, when it happened. But he's actually been decent. So I will own that I was probably a little bit wrong on that.
Well, you were probably basing that on what you heard from guys like me over the years. Hey, Emelin's a perfectly fine player. It's just you don't want him in your top four necessarily. But glad to hear that he's been able to hold the fort, and it's nice to be able to play with a guy like Subban. Listen, we're going to make sure that we have more time next time we do this. I got a little carried away talking about Seattle and Arizona with Sean Leahy in the last segment. So I'm going to let you go, Jim. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it, and let's make sure to do it again soon.
Yeah, no worries, Connor. Good talking to you.
That is Jim Diamond. Follow him on Twitter at Diamond Hockey, covering the Nashville Predators for the Associated Press and Rinkside Report. Down there in Nashville, man, oh man, that is a nice looking team. Should be a lot of fun as the playoffs loom closer. I got to get down there and see a playoff game. All right, second hour of the show is right around the corner. We're chatting with Dan Rosen, Sarah McLellan, Jonas, Siegel, and more. So don't miss that. Hockey Primetime on SiriusXM NHL Network Radio and streaming live at hockeyprimetime.com.
Dan's ready.
welcome back. This is Hockey Primetime. My name is Conor McKenna, the host of the show. Nice to be with you on this lovely, lovely Saturday. We're taking the show on the road this week. We're in Toronto, where I think most Toronto sports fans have at least one eye on the MLS Cup Final. It's happening in downtown Toronto, right around the SiriusXM NHL Network studios, as a matter of fact. And, well, they just scored a goal that I would imagine if they had offside review in Major League Soccer the way they do in hockey, you would have had a coach throwing out the challenge there because there appears to be at least a little bit of controversy as to whether the player who scored, Josie Altidore, was offside. But that's hockey, and that's, I mean, soccer. You know, who cares, right? At least the guy went in and scored and didn't take a dive and writhe around like he just broke his leg, right? And then stand up and just walk it off like nothing was wrong. That's my favorite soccer thing. What's your favorite soccer thing? Let's talk a little bit about our favorite hockey thing. I like it when the salary cap goes up. That means more players making more money. I'm always in favor of that. I'd rather it be them than the owners who are making all the money. So we're talking about a salary cap increase between $3 and $7 million. Where are we? Around 75 right now. Could go as high as 82. Maybe as low as 78. Maybe they split the difference at about 80. Either way, more money for NHL players. I know Austin Matthews is looking at that number. He's seeing dollar signs. I know John Tavares is looking at that number. He's seeing dollar signs. So a little bit more on what this means. Let's welcome in our friend Dan Rosen, who is covering the National Hockey League and covers the National Hockey League for NHL.com. Dan, how are you?
I'm good, man. How are you?
How are you? I'm doing well. Thanks for making time for us here. I do appreciate it. You can follow Dan on Twitter at DRosenNHL. So when you hear that number, and it feels like a pretty big one with the salary cap going up, but what do you think?
You know, I think it's good. I mean, revenues are up, HRR is up. So that means the salary cap goes up, and that's the big thing. And you know what they're projecting at least a $3 million increase, which is good considering we didn't know what the projection was going to be last year at this time, and it only went up $2 million, and that was because the PA put in a 1.6% inflator. I mean, they could put in up to 5%. So if they put up to 5%, the projection then goes to $82 million. If they put in 2.5%, it goes to $80 million. So cap going up, I think, is just a sign that business is good. As Gary Bettman alluded to, revenues are projected to go up 8.2%, which is a significant bump. It gets them up to $4.54 billion in HRR. I think that's a significant bump for the NHL. To get 8.2% bump, a year over year, 8.2%. That's pretty good.
And that's the type of thing that will make the owners happy, right? Gary Bettman clearly is getting results. Despite a lot of criticism over the lack of Olympic participation and some questionable, I don't say questionable, but maybe tenuous situations in some of the markets, namely Carolina, although maybe a little more stability coming there, and Arizona, which continues. I mean, it sort of begs the question: is like, how much money could they be making if sort of everything was firing on all cylinders? And I guess the answer is quite a lot.
Ooh. Quite a lot, but in what league is everything firing on all cylinders? It doesn't happen. You know, maybe you could say it about the NFL, but that's a different beast altogether. I think the way the NHL looks at it right now is, look, stability. They have significant market stability. Yes, Arizona's looking for a new arena. Yes, Ottawa's looking for a new arena. Carolina's they're hoping that stability is going to be there with Tom Dundon buying the majority share of the team from Peter Karmanos, and we'll see if that all goes through. The purchase agreement is there. Vegas is off to a terrific start, so there's good stability there. But I mean, if you have only Calgary, obviously in their arena situation too. If you have only a few teams like that, and the rest pretty stable, you got yourself a healthy league, and I think that's where the NHL looks at it now. The balance of the league is remarkably healthy when you consider the fact that the stability you have, plus you look at the 8.2% bump in revenues, and that's HRR. That's split between the players and the owners at a 50-50 split per the CBA. So everybody's happy with that bump.
And of course, if everything is going so swimmingly and everybody's making money and there's a lot of smiles, I mean, maybe less of a chance that we have a labor stoppage, yet another labor stoppage in a couple of years? What do you think?
Man, from your lips to God's ears, right? Let's hope. I mean, I couldn't give you any insight on that right now. Nobody would be talking about that at this point. In fact, it did kind of come up a little bit at the Board of Governor meetings with the Seattle news, because they'd be ready to go in 2020. That's when the arena would be ready if the expansion does go through in Seattle. And they've invited David Bonderman and Jerry Bruckheimer to submit an expansion application. So that building would be ready to go through in 2020. And there's the reopener on both sides for the lockout, effective the deadline to submit the reopener 2019 of September, and then it would be effective September 2020. I think, if you're looking at bright side of things, and the league would, with interest of bringing a Seattle market in, I highly doubt they would be interested in bringing Seattle in for a lockout, or a strike, one way or the other. But let's just hope. Let's just hope that it doesn't come to that. And I think that's, the reality that the league and the PA are dealing with right now is, they're not negotiating yet. It's still too early, and there's hope that we can have labor peace.
It was kind of an amazing story, this Seattle thing this week, wasn't it? Just how quickly this all came together. I mean, all of a sudden, they've approved this $600 million renovation of KeyBank Arena, and then within 48 hours, Seattle is all of a sudden at the forefront. We've got a number from Gary Bettman for an expansion fee and everything. I mean, obviously things happen behind closed doors that we're not privy to or aware of, but it was remarkable, wasn't it, how quickly this whole thing developed in the last few days?
Well, yeah, and I think what you said there is, things happen behind closed doors that we don't know about. The NHL was being kept abreast of the situation going on in Seattle with the Oakview Group and with the city council and the approval. They knew, a little bit of what was happening with that. And basically they said to the group in Seattle, you take care of your business and then come to us. But they were prepared for them to come to them once they did. And that's why it happened so fast. The approval I think it was Monday, the city council voted to approve the memorandum of understanding for Oakview. And then I believe it was Wednesday where the mayor, Jenny Durkin, signed the memorandum of understanding to allow Oakview to have the $600 million renovation of the Key Arena. And then right then and there is when, so Bonderman and Bruckheimer then say, we want an expansion team. So it was all coming together behind closed doors, but it all did happen quickly this week just because of the, of each, step that needed to take place just took place in a quick succession. And they had to have an expansion fee idea in mind, ready to go. Remember, the last time they did expansion, they opened it up. Seattle had 3 prospective buyers and 3 prospective owners in Seattle, but they didn't have a building. I think the NHL was kind of hoping that Seattle would be involved in the last round of expansion, but they didn't have a building, so they couldn't get involved.
There is a lot of money in Seattle right now, and that obviously that obviously helps. If there's one thing I've learned as I've gotten older is that money is the frequently the root of, but often and almost always the solution to all of life's problems. We're talking to Dan Rosen.
Homer Simpson said something similar to that, but
I believe yes, along those lines. I believe he was talking about alcohol, if I'm not mistaken, right? The cause of and solution to all of life's problems. Yeah.
You said it. I didn't.
Well, Homer said it. I mean, I'm just quoting him. We've got Dan Rosen from NHL.com on the line, and this is Hockey Primetime on Sirius XM NHL Network Radio. You can listen to the show streaming live at hockeyprimetime.com. Less than an hour to go until we turn it over to coverage of the Montreal Canadiens and the Edmonton Oilers live from the Bell Center in Montreal. Connor McDavid and the Oilers making their annual visit. All right, a couple of other things here, and the salary cap news that we talked about. I believe I said a couple of names. I don't know if I said the name of Erik Karlsson, who has already, before we learned the cap was going up, this guy wants to cash in, and with good reason, right? A lot like John Tavares, he's probably been playing at a number a little bit below his market value for a couple of years now. What do you make of this Erik Karlsson Ottawa Senators saga, which I guess really is just getting going?
Well, it's just getting going. I think the thing that made it a big story
was twofold. One, it was Erik Karlsson, so he's a big name. But the other was it was a player coming out and talking about money he wants to make. You know, we don't typically hear that in hockey. We know they want to make money. We know that they, you know, very few times guys are going to settle for less. They're going to take less to benefit the team. Steven Stamkos may have done that. Victor Hedman may have done that. We don't really know. But this was, you know, he was coming out and talking about, I'm going to get paid what I get paid. And Drew Doughty sort of did the same thing, right? So good on them. Hey, they have to. I think what we need to remember is they're players, and fans love them as players, but they are their own businesses at the same time, and they shouldn't have to settle for less. They're their own business. If you were your own business, or I am my own business, you're not going to take less money if you think, you know, than what you believe your market value is worth, and that's pretty much all these guys are saying.
Yes, I think it is. That is a very key thing to sort of mention and point out, Dan, that I think very often, and I don't know if this is any more true now than it used to be. It's definitely true, though. A lot of fans do not think of them as people even, or entities who do sort of deserve to. And remember this, I mean, imagine that your earning potential was sort of capped over the course of a very short period of time. There is only a finite number of years in which you can make this kind of money and set your family up for potentially for generations. And
people are going to say, and people will say, well, how much money does a guy need? He deserves to be paid exactly what the market would be willing to pay him. You know, that's if that's a lot of money, then terrific for him. Now the question is for Ottawa, can they afford it? That's the big question for Ottawa.
Can they afford it? Can they afford not to sign him, though? And if you're Karlsson, you know, the other thing is you've only got so many years in the prime of your career. And do you feel you're surrounded and in the right situation there to maximize those years and go out and win championships? We've seen the NBA really sort of trend in a certain direction when it comes to that, and guys really just going out and trying to win titles. And you could feel the way you want about that. But I got something else I'm worried about. I'm watching Erik Karlsson play hockey, and this guy has not been himself for about a month now. He came out and got a lot of points when he first came back, but he's not skating the way that he was. The hope is that all of a sudden something changes and he gets back on track. But how much of a concern is that he's in the coldest spell of his entire career right now?
Well, you know what? It is a concern. And I actually, you know, it's happening in reverse than from what I thought it was going to happen. I thought he was going to come out and struggle at the start because let's not remember the surgery he had was a major surgery. And I thought it was going to take him some time. And I did wonder if he was going to be able to be the same player that we know Erik Karlsson to be, or if he was going to have to adjust his game. Well, he came out flying and everything was going great. But the other thing about it was he was making passes and the puck was going in the net. A pass and the puck was going in the net. Like you can get a lot. Your team's on fire and your team is scoring some goals. The goals have dried up. He is not skating the same way as he has been. I think this is a struggle a little bit for Karlsson because he has to figure out not a brand new way to play, but a different way to play because he can't do the exact same things that we have seen him do, or he isn't capable of doing them yet because this is a major, major surgery that he had in an area, you know, his ankle or his heel or in that area. That's his bread and butter, his skating and his ability to skate with the puck and move the puck. And if he's going to have a little bit of a mobility issue, he has to find a way to adjust. I think of it as in a way of like when a baseball pitcher maybe has a 100-mile-per-hour fastball and they lose zip off of that. They can't just keep gunning the fastball in because it's going to get hit. They have to find a way to be a pitcher and pitch around that. And maybe Karlsson's going to have to find that too.
Dan Rosen of NHL.com on the line with us here on Hockey Primetime. Okay, a couple other quick ones I wanted to get to before I let you go here, Dan. One of them is the New Jersey Devils, who are the most surprising team, I think we can say, in the Eastern Conference. They're going out making a significant trade the other day, also playing a brand of hockey that is far more exciting than the one I've grown accustomed to seeing that organization play during a very successful run in the last couple of decades. What do you make of the season the Devils have put together so far, and do you think they can hang on in a highly competitive division?
Yeah, I do think that they can hang on. And I think a key for them was they went through a stretch of, I believe it was 7 games in 12 days. They won 4 of those games. They went out west to play 3 in a row. They won 2 of those games. They put up a stinker in Arizona, which is a rare occurrence this season that teams are putting up stinkers against the Coyotes, but they did. They lost that game 5-0, but they still won 2 out of 3 in a Western swing. They came, they beat the Blue Jackets earlier the week. They did lose. That was a tough loss for them Friday at home against Columbus, but they to me have gotten over the hump of when I thought that they might drop off. And now I look at them as a legitimate threat. Now, are they going to be first in the division, third in the division, fifth in the division? I don't know, because there's 1 or 2 points that separate first from fifth and like 4 points that separate first from sixth. They got to find a way to be in the top 5 of that division, and they'll be in the playoffs. I think 5 teams go, and if they're one of those first 5, they'll be in. And that will be a remarkable turnaround for the New Jersey Devils in one season. They play a fast-paced game. They've got guys who are hungry. I've never seen Taylor Hall play the way he's played this season, and that is something that's obviously sparked this team. So they, to me, have gotten over that hump. I see them as legit.
1 point out the division lead right now, and holding a game in hand on Columbus, 2 in hand on Washington. And as you mentioned, it's so tight. You've got 2 points separating first and fifth in the Metropolitan Division, and the Rangers aren't too far behind either, although lagging a little bit lately. So yeah, it's an exciting division. What a race! All right, we're out of time. So Dan, thank you for making time for us. I really do appreciate it. A lot of fun chatting with you tonight.
All right, you got it, Connor. Take care, man.
That's Dan Rosen, NHL.com senior writer. I'm Conor McKenna. This is Hockey Primetime here on SiriusXM, NHL Network Radio. Also streaming live at hockeyprimetime.com. We're on YouTube Live. We're on Periscope. We're on the Facebook Live as well. Hello. Thanks for joining us across the world and on the World Wide Web. And we will continue to try to provide at least a decent level of programming for you. Coming up next, Sarah McLellan is covering the Minnesota Wild for the Minnesota Star Tribune. You got guys bouncing around there. Charlie Coyle, is he a center? Is he a winger? You've got Mikko Koivu coming back and not producing. You've got Devin Dubnyk, who got off to a bad start and then appeared to figure it out. And you've got veteran guys with, how much term does Zach Parise have on his contract? 10 more years? And will he ever play again? Lots of questions surrounding the Minnesota Wild. We'll talk to Sarah McLellan of the Minnesota Star Tribune about those questions next on Hockey Primetime.
2 minutes.
Thank you. Minnesota.
There you go, Connor. It's over now.
Is it? Yeah.
They just pot another one in.
There you go. Party on.
Watch out. Hide the women and children.
Oh.
Phone keeps ringing for Sarah, so I'll keep on trying her.
Okay.
All right, coming up here.
Three, two, one. Hey, welcome back. It's Hockey Primetime on Sirius XM NHL Network Radio, also streaming live at hockeyprimetime.com. You can also watch us on Periscope, on Facebook Live, on YouTube Live. Well, however it is that you're doing this, you know, if you've got your smartphone, boom, click it on Facebook Live. You're gonna see my pretty mug looking at you. It's got my hair done. Been working out. No, that's not true. I haven't been working out. I don't work out, and I didn't get my hair done. But I still do care. I do devote at least a little bit of attention to my appearance, knowing that you'll be seeing what I look like here in real life. What have you been picturing, right? All these years, like, I wonder what that guy looks like, that annoying guy who's on from 5 to 7 on Saturdays. And then you see it, and you're like, wow, huh. I thought he was, I thought he was going to be older, or, oh, he sounded fatter, or something like that. Who knows? I don't know. You can let me know if you want to. You can find me on Twitter at McKenna Connor. And we've got a busy night ahead in the National Hockey League. One game is in the books already, and a number are coming up, including right here on Sirius XM NHL Network Radio from the Bell Center in Montreal. Dan Robertson and Sergio Momesso on TSN 690 will have the call of the Montreal Canadiens hosting Connor McDavid and the Edmonton Oilers. Montreal's getting Jonathan Drouin back into their lineup, so the matchup got a little bit better with that. Montreal's record, dismal record against Western Conference teams on the line tonight, and a lot of unhappy fans in that market right now. I was reading, and we were planning on chatting with Sarah McLellan of the Minnesota Star Tribune, although having a little trouble connecting with her right now. And I was reading her latest in the on the Star Tribune website.
She's ready.
Talking about Chris Stewart, who is not only does he fight, although as Sarah points out in the piece, fights are down. I think we've got 1/3 the fights now that we had in the NHL just a couple of years ago. Chris Stewart trains with a MMA trainer, a boxing MMA coach during the off season. I mean, don't mess with that guy. He fought Curtis McDermott the other day. That dude's 6'5", 233 pounds. Damn. That's a heavyweight bout. With more on that, and to take a look at the story with the Minnesota Wild, we've got Sarah McLellan, who's with the Star Tribune, covering the Wild. Hello, Sarah.
Hi, how are you?
I'm well, thanks, and thanks for making time for us here today. That's pretty amazing that Chris Stewart works with a boxing MMA trainer. I always wondered about that, and I think that was a fascinating fact to pick up in your piece there the other day.
Yeah, I think that just shows the pride and the attention that, players put into their craft, and, whether they're a 30-goal scorer or a stay-at-home defenseman, or in Chris's case, someone who's looked upon to, generate energy and be tough to play against, and, chip in scoring, but also be, a presence on the ice that the other team recognizes. I think players take a lot of pride in that, and, try to maximize their skills. And for him, that's part of his job description. That's part of his role. And he's worked with a coach, a boxing MMA coach for about the last 5 to 6 years. And, I think it's also something, he acknowledged that helps with cardio and, can help in other areas of your off-season training. But, that's just kind of the focus. And I think that mindset that players have is they understand what they have to do to maintain a job, help out a team. And for Chris, that's just part of his MO. Right.
And of course, just make sure you don't apply too much of that MMA training, right? Like, you don't want to be doing like a spinning roundhouse kick or anything like that. That's a whole different ball of wax. But it's true,
yeah,
right?
For sure.
These dudes are
for sure.
They're bare knuckle fighting against, as you write in your piece, this guy that he fought the other night, 6'5", 233 pounds. You best believe that you will go to seek training or give yourself the best possible chance of winning that fight, not being embarrassed and suffering what could be a sort of a career-changing, career-threatening, or career-ending injury in the process, right?
Yeah, I think that's also part of it too, is just how to protect yourself and how to do it smartly so that you don't get injured. Because as much as, you may be trying to flip momentum and capitalize on a moment to set a tone in a game, The bigger cost obviously is if, you get hurt and you remove yourself from the lineup, from the game for however long. So yeah, I think that's part of it too, is just if you know that this is going to be part of your job description and a responsibility on ice, how to do it effectively, without ultimately hurting yourself or the team in the process, for sure.
Interesting quote from Stewart as well, saying, you don't want to see Crosby and Taves squaring off or stuff like that. I don't know about you. I would be totally fine seeing Sidney Crosby and Jonathan Taves fight. But anyway, and the point is well taken. And Minnesota, meanwhile, they did win that game the other night. And I guess the other thing is picking your spot, right? It's something you have to be conscious of, especially, and Stewart's not a fringe guy like some of the other fighters are, but I saw Nicolas Deslauriers here in Montreal for the Canadiens. He got into a fight. He sort of fired up, I think it was the Arizona bench, if I'm not mistaken, a couple of weeks ago. And it really sort of was a momentum shifter. The Coyotes then sort of took over the game after what Deslauriers did. I guess another really important thing is, and the coach called him out after the game, like, you have to pick your spots at this point, especially with fighting down to, 0.2 fights per game on average now.
Yeah, I think that's something, Stewart mentioned, and something that he's kind of obviously been able to hone through the years. And then I think he really takes pride in it, the fact that he can kind of have that feel of the game, that pulse, to know when the time is right, because there's not always that opportune moment. And sometimes you're right, it can kind of give momentum to the other team. And I think that's the last thing these guys want to do when they drop the gloves, is make it so that, it takes away from their team and gives to the other team. So there's so much that goes into it. And, we can just look at the numbers and say it's going down. But I mean, for these players, it still remains, I think, a really relevant part of the game. It's still a tool that's used, maybe not in the same way that it used to be when, it was just kind of two heavyweights squaring off at center stage, and maybe it didn't have such a big part of the actual game flow, but now it still seems like it does, because they're using it to try to generate momentum, trying to get a team going, trying to set a tone. And so I think that's part of Stewart's role for the Wild, and something that he really kind of focuses on as a way that he can help the team.
We're talking to Sarah McLellan. She covers the Minnesota Wild for the Minnesota Star Tribune after years of covering the Arizona Coyotes. And now based in Minnesota. Other than the obvious thing, the weather being, I mean, I was just down in the Valley of the Sun 2 weeks ago. It was amazing. It was between like 80 and 90 degrees every day. There wasn't a drop of rain. I mean, it was incredible. But other than the weather and the obvious differences there, how, if you don't mind me asking, has it been different covering the Wild versus covering the Coyotes?
Well, I think just kind of plopping into a season here with the Wild has been interesting because of the way that they performed last season, obviously on the heels of a franchise best season. It's been really interesting to kind of see the expectations and, maybe perhaps the pressure and the spotlight that comes with such a successful season and a team that is continually looking to get over that playoff hump and, be a legit contender who can vie for a Stanley Cup. And obviously the Coyotes were in the midst of a rebuild and just kind of at the other end of the spectrum right now, where they're trying to build their momentum to get to that spot. The Wild is kind of at that precipice of just trying to, find that formula to really seal it and make that run that, they've really kind of been constructing their roster the last few years to go on. And it just hasn't materialized to the extent that I think the organization probably hoped. So it's been really interesting to kind of, chronicle that and see just how a team, deals with that type of expectation, kind of day in, day out, how they build towards that, potential playoff payoff in April and May. And so that's been really fascinating, because I think this is probably a really telling time for the franchise and an important juncture in, how they move forward. It really does look like this is the team. This is their core. They don't have a lot of flexibility against the cap, and with the contracts that are on their books, this looks like this is, the majority of their team for now. And so it's up to these players to be the ones to try to, capitalize and go on that run that this team has been looking for.
And some nice looking prospects too on the horizon, but I think your point's well taken. Also, just, the whole Zach Parise thing, and what a shame that is, the way that's gone so far. And Ryan Suter is signed until, I don't know, what is it, 2030 or something like that. I mean, those contracts are really are sort of are something else. And so is that it? Does it feel like And just to sort of try to sort of exactly summarize what you're saying here, does it feel in a way like if there is a championship window, then it's open right now and it may not be open that much longer?
I feel like it is. I think the window is open for now, for sure, and I think it'll probably stay open with this core assembled. I don't know if there is much wiggle room to finesse it or add or make tweaks. Obviously general managers always find ways to kind of fuss with their roster, but, I think the window is definitely open, and maybe it is the length of some of these long-term contracts on the books. Maybe it closes before then, but it definitely seems propped open now, especially on the heels of last season. So in that sense, I guess it really is up to the court for how long that window stays propped open, and if they have opportunity beyond this season, beyond next, because if this is the core and, the contracts are what they are, it does look like they'll probably be the ones to dictate that.
What do you make of the Charlie Coyle back and forth saga, winger, center, and I believe currently a winger again? What is your opinion on where he should be?
Well, I think his versatility, because this is a forward group that's been in a little bit of flux, obviously because of the injuries early in the season. But I think just finding a mix that works is important, and I think that's why we've seen the lines juggled. And so I think it's probably an asset for Coach Bruce Boudreau to be able to kind of tinker and maximize Charlie's assets, whether it is on the wing or at center. And I think for Charlie, I don't think it changes much of his game whether he's up the middle and kind of being a little bit being that third guy high, or if he's on the wing just kind of going up and down and using his speed and his muscle to try to hold on to the puck and create plays that way. I think that's a tool that the Wild can continue to kind of exploit, is kind of to put him in and shift him around wherever they see fit. And so far it doesn't seem like it minimizes his impact at all.
Sarah, thank you for your time. I really do appreciate it, and I hope we can catch up with you again soon.
Sounds good. Take care.
That is Sarah McLellan covering the Minnesota Wild for the Minnesota Star Tribune. The Wild are off tonight. They're back in action tomorrow night at San Jose. That's 9 o'clock Eastern, 6 o'clock local time. The Sharks and the Minnesota Wild. They did win last night, getting an OT winner from Matt Dumba and beating the Anaheim Ducks, who just still the Ducks. Wow. I mean, you want to talk about championship windows. When you're looking at Getzlaf and Kessler in particular, how much longer do you have those guys as key components on a championship roster? This team's done a good job of drafting and developing. How many teams could just say, yeah, you know what, let's trade Sami Vatanen, spare part, right? On a lot of teams, that guy's a bona fide top four, and they've got so much depth there on the blue line that they were able to say, yeah, we can let him go. But how much longer? They better figure it out, because they got to get into the playoffs, and if they do, nobody's going to want anything to do with them. Coming up next, let's talk Leafs. The Toronto Maple Leafs are in action tonight, taking on Sidney Crosby and the Penguins. Jonas Siegel of The Athletic covers the Toronto Maple Leafs. We'll talk to Jonas on the other side. This is Hockey Primetime on SiriusXM NHL Network Radio and streaming live, always for free, at hockeyprimetime.com. Hey, welcome back. This is Hockey Primetime on Sirius XM NHL Network Radio and streaming live at hockeyprimetime.com. I'm Conor McKenna, the host of the show. Happy Saturday. I hope you're enjoying it. And, I was going to say, is there a hotter ticket in town than Sidney Crosby and the Penguins making a visit to the ACC tonight? Well, I guess that would be the MLS Cup, but still a pretty hot one as Crosby and the Penguins visit. Phil Kessel coming back to town. See if he'll hit up his favorite hot dog vendor, or if he did hit him up earlier today. Oh wait, that wasn't a true story. Sorry, I take that back. Phil Kessel, he's tearing it up for the Pittsburgh Penguins, and Austin Matthews and the boys are going to be hosting them tonight. Let's talk a little bit more about the Toronto Maple Leafs. Our next guest covers the Leafs, has done so for years, is now doing it for The Athletic, theathletic.com. His name is Jonas Siegel. Jonas, how you doing, man?
I'm doing well. How about you?
I'm doing very well. And if I had told you that the Leafs would have 2 goals from Mitch Marner and would be chasing the Tampa Bay Lightning and really sort of rolling right now, would you have been surprised they've been as good as they are, given they've got only 2 goals out of Marner?
I probably wouldn't have been overly surprised. I mean, they're just so deep that even if Mitch Marner has 2 goals, they still have so many other guys who can score. And he's not, like, I think he had 19 goals last year, 19 goals, but he's not, even their 5th best scorer maybe in terms of, scoring goals. He's more the guy to create opportunities for his teammates, and he's slowly starting to kind of come around and look more like the player that we saw last year. But they just have so many weapons. And that's why, you look at this team, and even before the year really got going, you could look at them and say, this is a team that could challenge for the lead in goals. They just have, 5, 6, maybe 7 guys who could score 20. And you've got, 3 guys that I believe tied with 13 with Ben Rinkside, Kadri, and Austin Matthews. And another guy who I would expect to score more and who hasn't scored a whole bunch is William Nylander. And at some point, I expect him to start finding the back of net a little bit more. And right now the Leafs, I believe, are 3rd in offense in the league. So they just have so many weapons that even if one guy like Marner maybe isn't producing like they thought, they've got other guys who can kind of fill that void.
And at least in practice yesterday, you got Marner, and you mentioned how deep they are. That's a pretty good 3rd line. Van Riemsdyk, Bozak, and Mitch Marner. And then your 4th line, Matt Martin, Dominic Moore, and William Nylander. Marner and Nylander, though, on your sort of quote-unquote 3rd and 4th lines. What's your feeling on that? And I know, look, Mike Babcock, there's a reason he has the reputation that he does. This is a highly respected and highly accomplished hockey coach. What's your feel, though, on, in Nylander in particular, trying to get a guy going by putting him in a situation where it's more difficult to produce?
Well, he flipped him around a whole bunch this year. Like last year, for most of the second half, and really like 2/3 of the year, Nylander played with Matthews. And that duo had worked okay to start the year, but not like it had the previous season. So they kind of switched things up, and from time to time, Mike Babcock likes to put Connor Brown there, someone he trusts a little bit more, someone who I think he feels like he can rely on a little bit more, and, hope that putting Nylander a little bit further down the lineup will get him going. The thing is, he still gets, 17 minutes a game. He's still playing a whole bunch. Like even last game, Babcock will take someone like Nylander midway through a game where the Leafs are looking for a goal, and he'll put him with Matthews. Like, this is just a temporary thing, but it comes when you're that deep. Babcock likes to say, they have 10 top 9 forwards. So there's always going to be someone out of place. There's always going to be someone playing on a 4th line if there are no injuries. And right now, and really for the most part this year, they haven't suffered injuries. And it's just a benefit. When you can have a 3rd line with a 30-goal scorer like James Van Riemsdyk and a guy who had 60 points as a rookie in Mitch Marner, how do you match up with that? Like, where do you put your best weapons defensively? It just makes it really tough on opposing coaches, and I think, that's the luxury that the Leafs have right now.
Talking Toronto Maple Leafs with Jonas Siegel from The Athletic. You can subscribe at theathletic.com, and gift packages are available. If you haven't subscribed already, you're getting excellent coverage, and not just of your local teams, but everywhere that an athletic site is set up, and coverage of the National Hockey League that at this point might already be unparalleled. I guess what I'm saying is you should probably subscribe. And if you have a friend who has not done so yet, it's a good chance to hook them up during the holiday season. Why not? All right, so Jonas, a couple other things. So, oh, by the way, I mean, it's the ACC. Are we going to see a Matt Hunwick tribute of some sort tonight? Are we going to get a video or anything like that?
This game, I hate to tell you, is actually in Pittsburgh.
Oh, okay. I screwed that up. All right. My bad. All right. So no Matt Hunwick tribute then. Okay.
No.
All right. So moving on then. Freddie Anderson. I know he had a tough start, and he had a tough start last year too, if memory serves, when he joined the Leafs. But he has been as good as any goaltender for the last couple of months. And I've even heard some Vezina hype in the last couple of days. Is that fair? Is it legit to put him among the top goalies in the league this year?
I always think it's funny to start talking like award races in October, November, December, because it's going to change so much. But he's been very good the last month. And you're right. Last year, he got off to a really slow start, and it was basically the same this year. Like, the numbers were almost identical. He had like a sub-900 save percentage. The team was winning a whole bunch, so it didn't really become this big issue like it might have in other markets, you know, where the team starts losing, the goaltender's not playing well. And then the same thing that happened last year just really happened again. You know, he started playing better in November, and as November went along, he played better and better and better. And then you were looking at his numbers, and you're like, you know, at one point you're looking at his numbers, and, you know, he's got a sub-900 save percentage. And then you look at them now, and he's up at 922. And he's been, you know, if you're looking for one reason for why they've been on this run and why they're, you know, chasing down Tampa for first in the conference, he might be it. You know, he's been terrific, and he's facing a ton of shots. Like, it's not like, you know, every night he's got an easy night and they're just winning. Some nights, you know, they're giving up 35, 40 shots. You know, he's averaging about 35 shots a game in terms of what he's facing. So he's been really good. And whether he can keep this up, we'll see. But if he does, you know, he'll put himself in that race, you know, for the Vezina. We'll see, you know, where it ends up, though.
All right. And speaking of tribute videos, I don't know if Ron Hainsey is going to get one there in Pittsburgh, but he's been terrific. Have you been surprised? And what can you tell me as somebody who's not watching this team and following this team day in, day out, how good he's been?
I have. Yeah, sorry. I have been surprised. I think if they were being honest, they would have to say that they're probably surprised. Although, you know, right when they got him, Mike Babcock made it pretty clear that he was going to take Ron Hainsey and put him right on his top pair, playing with Morgan Riley, and play him a good deal of minutes in tough situations. And the surprising thing is how well he's done with that. You know, you look back to last year, second half, when he was playing with Pittsburgh, he was on their top pair basically out of necessity. You know, Chris Letang goes out, and they need him to step up and play a bunch of minutes. And, you know, what the Leafs will say is, you know, he's been kind of a calming influence for someone like Riley, who's, you know, on his way to a career-type season in terms of offense, in terms of minutes, or the type of minutes that he's playing. So he's been everything I think they could have hoped for. He kills a ton of penalties. It's only a 2-year contract. We'll see. I guess this is kind of the one thing. We'll see if this can keep up. You know, he is, I believe, going to be 37 in March. He played, obviously, a ton of minutes last year. He's playing a lot this year. But so far, he's been pretty good.
With Jonas Siegel of The Athletic just finishing up here ahead of the Leafs, who are in Pittsburgh to take on the Penguins tonight, making my hot dog joke bad and my Matt Hunwick tribute video joke also bad. Jonas, what about this? And I thought it was fascinating reading your piece about Dr. Jeremy Bettel, that the Leafs do not allow anyone in the organization other than players and who is it? It's Lou Lamoriello, Brendan Shanahan, and Mike Babcock. That's it. Nobody else is allowed to speak for the organization. Is that right?
That's exactly right. It's an interesting concept, because I guess what it does, and I know this is what it does, is it prevents different ideas getting out there from different sources. So if you're Lou Lamoriello, and let's say you start letting, you know, Kyle Dubas or Mark Hunter speak, there's a tendency for a different message to come out than maybe the one that you want. And so what this does is it keeps the message kind of on point to what the people in charge want it to be. Now, can it be frustrating for people like me? For sure, because, you know, in situations like that story where I'm writing a story about Jeremy Bettel, I can't talk to Jeremy Bettel. So I can't actually, find out exactly what he's doing and why he's doing it. But a big thing with Lou Lamoriello is he likes things a certain way. And when he came in as the general manager, he changed a whole bunch of things. And that was one of the changes that he made.
Huh. I was going to ask you, is that a Shanahan initiative or a Lou initiative? So, do you have any sense as far as Lamoriello goes? And I know, I mean, this has been quite the renaissance for him at the helm of the Maple Leafs. So, how much longer we will see him at the helm of this team? Any sense? Any thoughts on that?
Well, it's believed that this is the last year of his contract, and we don't have any reason to think that his contract has been renewed yet. But it's possible they've done that and we don't know about it. The thing with Lou Lamoriello is, like, you talk to people who have worked with him, and they'll tell you he's never going to retire. Like, he's just going to want to keep working and working and working. He's in good shape. He takes care of himself. He loves being around the rink. So I don't know where this goes. I think it's a really interesting situation for Brendan Shanahan, who, almost looks at Lou Lamoriello as like a second father. He drafted Brendan Shanahan way back in the day with Jersey. The two have a really close relationship. So what do you do if you're Brendan Shanahan, you want to kind of turn the page to a newer voice? Where do you go? Like, do you decide to try to move Lou Lamoriello within your organization? Do you keep him as a general manager, given the way that things have gone and progressed nicely while he's been in charge? I think it's going to be a really interesting and probably a big story whenever they decide to make a move and either keep him, put him in a different role, or, whether Lou Lamoriello decides to stick around if he's not the general manager. These are all kind of questions that are kind of milling about in Toronto under the scene.
Do you think if he does stay that they're in danger of losing Kyle Dubas to another team?
Yeah, I could certainly see that. I mean, we saw last year, I believe it was reported that the Colorado Avalanche wanted to either talk. I'm trying to remember. I can't remember if they actually talked to him or if they wanted to talk to him and he wasn't permitted. I'm not quite sure on the details. I'm trying to think back, but I'm sure, given Kyle Dubas's aspirations, there's a sense that he is going to be a general manager somewhere someday. So if it's not going to be in Toronto, where is it going to be? And does he see, opportunities still in Toronto if Lou Lamoriello hangs around? And if, all the indications from people who know Lamoriello are right, if he has no plans of going anywhere anytime soon. So a long answer to your question is yes, they're probably in danger of losing him if Lamoriello ends up sticking around for the long haul.
He's been with the team for 3.5 years, Dubas has, and they did allow him. They granted permission him to speak to the Avalanche. I think it was in May of this year. Jonas, thank you for your time. I appreciate it, man, and have a great night. Enjoy the rest of the weekend, and all the best to you and yours for the holiday season.
Likewise. Thanks, Connor.
That is Jonas Siegel from The Athletic, and I'm Conor McKenna for Hockey Primetime. We'll be back to wrap things up. I want to tell you a story about cheering in the press box, so we're going to do that next here on Hockey Primetime on Sirius XM NHL Network Radio and streaming live at hockeyprimetime.com. Thank you for watching us on Facebook Live. I sort of probably should have spent a little more time paying attention to you during the show. We're off next week. We're not going to be doing a show. Well, at least we're not going to be on SiriusXM, but we may actually see you on Facebook Live. We're sort of working on the details there. So keep that in mind, and I hope you're having a great weekend, and I hope you're enjoying this bonus content that you're getting. Only the Facebook Live people are getting this. It's possible right now that I look like those NFL players on the sidelines talking to the camera, like they think that there's a microphone there and there isn't, so that they're just, you have no idea what they're saying, but they're talking to the camera. I feel like that's me right now. Hey, this is Hockey Primetime. I'm Conor McKenna. How you doing tonight? I hope you're having a good one so far. We are going to be listening to coverage and watching coverage of the Montreal Canadiens and the Edmonton Oilers. That's live from the Bell Center. Coming up right after this, a couple of minutes to go in the show. And if you haven't heard about this already, I did want to bring this up. I know I realize that this isn't really a big deal to a lot of fans, but I thought I'd sort of try to sort of shed a little bit of light and share a personal anecdote about cheering in the press box. And you're not supposed to do that, right? The Vegas Golden Knights Twitter account tweeted yesterday, right? This is the second time they've been in a little bit of hot water, so to speak, so far this year. The second time they've had to apologize for a tweet. And what are we, 30 games into the season? I like the Vegas Twitter account. It's fun. And sometimes when you're trying to be sort of risque and whatever, you're going to make a misstep. And I think they did that here. I also don't know if it's that big of a deal. But I think the problem is that it wasn't true. If it was true, then what's the big deal? But the fact that it wasn't true is sort of the problem there. Calling the integrity of media members into account, or into question, I should say. But years ago, I was covering the Canadiens and the Bruins in a playoff series. It was one of those, and you'll remember if you're a hockey fan, how intense it was between Montreal and Boston years ago. And it got intense. It turned into a media rivalry at one point because there was a game in Boston. I'm trying to recall if it was a game 6, and I don't have the good memory for this. I could look it up and figure it out, but it was just a hell of a game, back and forth, seesaw battle. And at one point, the Bruins scored a big goal. And this a reporter who was covering the event was sitting next to me, and she jumped up in the air and cheered. And this was like, for me, I was like, oh my God, like, wow, you're really not supposed to do that. I was told this from a very early time. I'd covered in the last 10 years, I covered a lot of NHL games, and you don't cheer in the press box. Impartiality is important. It's part of professionalism. It's just not done. You don't cheer in the press box. And I was taken aback that she cheered in the press box, and the guy sitting next to me, no need to say his name, but he's a well-known reporter for a national outlet in Canada, turned to her and said, like, excuse me, don't do that. Like, this is highly unprofessional, because it makes everybody look bad. But also the other thing about it is I realized, because I tweeted that this Bruins reporter was cheering in the press box, and all these Boston reporters got so angry at me. I realized it's because you're sort of calling the integrity of all of the media members into account. People are saying, oh, who was it? And I didn't want to single this woman out or anything like that. But the other thing I realized is that fans really don't care about this. This is not an issue that fans necessarily care about. It's interesting because I know it's very important to media members. And as somebody who's covered hundreds of NHL games as an accredited member of the media, I get it. But also realize that it's not something fans think matters really at all. Anyway, everybody always finds a reason to get mad about something, right? Happy Saturday night. So we're not on SiriusXM NHL Network Radio next week, but we will try to bring you a show. If not, either way, all the best to you and yours over the holiday season. We'll probably be checking in with you 2 weeks from now. Enjoy the games tonight. Let's turn it over to Dan Robertson and Sergio Momesso at the Bell Center on the TSN 690 Habs Radio Network.
Thanks, Connor. Have a good one.